Welcome and thank you for joining me here once again at Film Pro Productivity. Each week I'll be introducing concepts that film professionals and other creatives can use to make life easier and avoid creative burnout. I'll also present time management and lifestyle hacks for a more focused, effective and happy life. My name is Carter Ferguson and this is episode 13, Habit Forming for a Better Life. In this episode, I will be discussing the topic of habit forming and how forming new, good habits and, just as important, breaking old, bad ones can move you into a better life, a stronger career, and a happier place in general. In the last episode, though, I was keen to get into and raise your awareness of time wasters, as I've been tripping over them for years and they can really mess with your productivity if you let them. If you missed the episode, then check it out, and if you can suggest any more time waster archetypes, please drop me a line at filmproproductivity.com. Today, though, I will be tackling the topic of habit forming. Sean Covey, the American businessman and author of several books on this topic, states that we become what we repeatedly do. But to be fair, he stole that from Aristotle, who more fully stated, we are what we repeatedly do. So excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Somewhere along the way, I became aware that I had gotten out of the habit of doing something I really loved, reading. I hadn't picked up a book to read anything purely for fun in years. I decided that reading was something I had to start again, so I did. But I had to put a bit of work into it to get back into the habit. At first, I'd pick up a book and read 1 or 2 pages a night, and I found it really quite tiring, and I struggled. So I changed my tack. I decided to reread books I'd already read when I was younger, which were predominantly fantasy novels as it happens, but good for getting lost in and introducing new, wider worlds and situations. So I picked up J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. It wasn't quite what I remembered, to be honest, but I got through it much more quickly, reading more like 10 or 15 pages a night till just a couple of weeks later it was done. I picked up a heftier endeavour, but one I'd read before again, and I'd loved the films, which had been made more recently, so I reread Lord of the Rings, and that pulled me right in. I was up near 30 or 40 pages a night then. Then I moved on to Game of Thrones. I hadn't read those before, but I'd been watching the series, and that made it a little bit easier for me to follow the names and locations. I battered through those books, which were pretty hefty, I have got to be honest, in just a couple of months, and they were brilliant despite the huge page count. By that time, a good 6 months after I'd struggled with just 1 or 2 pages of reading a night, I was in the habit of reading between 50 and 100 pages a day. And not just at night when I was tired, but during the day, in stolen moments too, and the habit of reading was set. I now read every day. I make room for it, and I enjoy it. It's inspiring and engrossing and relaxing and all of the things it used to be when I was younger. It's now an established habit for me to read, and so I do. I don't think about it, I just do it. You too can form a habit with a little bit of effort and a little bit of commitment. The 19th century author William Makepeace Thackeray wrote that successful people aren't born that way. They become successful by establishing the habit of doing things that unsuccessful people don't like to do. You can use habit-forming systems to build strong, consciously formed habits of any type, but you have to start by being quite specific in what habit it is that you're trying to form. So have a think about what habits you'd like to break, or replace, or form. How about a fitness habit like walking every day? You might solve that by parking further away from where you work and walking in the last half mile and the half mile back again at the end of the day. Or you might want to change a mental habit like stopping yourself from being negative, which would start by increasing your awareness of when you are negative perhaps, and realising and acknowledging it each time. You might want to form a habit to relieve stress, which could be something simple like sitting outside in the park for 5 minutes every day and letting your mind wander, or a personal habit. One I'm trying to break myself is to not have a biscuit or a cake with every coffee that I drink. I've gotten into the habit of having a coffee and fill in the blank space here with cake type, and I'm desperate to break it. So I'm putting effort now into just having the coffee, or sometimes exchanging the coffee and a cake for a bottle of water and a piece of fruit. The most important part of forming any new habit is getting started. And I don't mean just getting started on day one of the habit, that's the easy day, but starting each and every day to form that habit and make it stick. Consistency makes the habit. Without consistency, there is no habit. I think where most people fall down in this scenario as time goes by is in the area of motivation. Your willpower can be rapidly depleted whilst trying to form new habits, but there are ways around this. Former Olympic athlete Jim Ryun said that motivation is what gets you started. Habit is what keeps you going. That's a very clear statement of this problem, and it leads us in the right direction. I'll say it again. Motivation is what gets you started. Habit is what keeps you going. Habit forming does require motivation at first, but eventually that inner drive is replaced by routine, and when that routine becomes set, it frees your motivation, your willpower, which is a limited resource, to be placed elsewhere. You'll recognise the name Stephen Geiss from an earlier episode. He wrote the book on how to be an imperfectionist, but he also wrote another book called Mini Habits, which I'll detail a little bit of here. The subtitle of Mini Habits is Smaller Habits, Bigger Results, which is the big message for me. Stephen's book makes habit forming easy by making the habits that you want to form, as he calls them, stupid small. He sets out to banish the days of unreachable goals and perpetual disappointment. As always, I highly recommend that you read the books that are referred to here, and this one will be linked to in the show notes for you. It's a quick read and it's brilliant. Stephen's strategy in creating habits is to make them so simple, so small, so easily achievable, that it is almost easier to do them than not to. He reminds us that doing a little bit is infinitely bigger and better than doing nothing, mathematically and practically speaking. And he also points out that doing a little bit every day has a greater impact than doing a lot in one day. To him, the system is more important than the goal. There's a ton of great content in the book, but one other thing that he says is that we're quick to blame ourselves for lack of progress, but slow to blame our strategies. And his strategies are designed to support our self-belief. Stephen Geiss's mini habits don't require a load of willpower. They are achievable, and through them we can form the habit of what we want to do and then improve upon it later. For example, let's say that you want to do 100 push-ups a day. In fact, hold on, we're Film Pro Productivity, let me change that. Let's say that you want to write, if you're a screenwriter, you want to write for 6 hours a day. 6 hours every day, that's what you're aiming for. But that could be a fast road to disappointment, let's face it. So let's change it. What if your goal, instead of writing for 6 hours every day, was to write for 1 minute every day? I'm pretty sure you could manage that. And if you can do 1 minute, just maybe you'll say, well, that wasn't so bad, I'll just do another. And every day, you just aim for 1 minute. In a couple of weeks, though, it wouldn't really be surprising if you found that you were actually sitting down to write for 20 minutes a day. In 30 days, and that number will become relevant a little bit later on, but in 30 days, maybe you're going to be sitting down for 30 minutes or an hour a day, but you're still only trying to get 1 minute written. And the 3 hours or 6 hours or whatever you're aiming for, that's not in the picture yet. But once your habit is formed, you can build on it. In a year's time, or in 6 months even, I suspect that you might be doing those 6 hours a day. And you'll have got there by thinking tactically and aiming for the stupid small. Smaller habits, remember. Bigger results. Somewhere along the line you'll see Newton's first law has come into play. That is, that an object either remains at rest or continues to move at a constant velocity. And the hard part of that law is moving from rest to motion. The mini habit, the mini goal gets you rolling. It pushes you into motion, and once you start, you can begin to do bonus stuff, like that extra minute of writing, or 5 minutes, or 10 minutes, or more. And as the rolling continues, you will achieve your bigger goals too. Stephen has 8 mini habit rules. And they are: 1. Never ever cheat. 2. Be happy with all progress. 3. Reward yourself often, especially after a mini habit. 4. Stay level-headed. 5. If you feel strong resistance, back off and go smaller. 6. Remind yourself how easy this is. 7. Never think a step is too small. And 8. Put extra energy and ambition towards bonus reps, not a bigger requirement. The 30 days that I mentioned a minute ago is relevant, as everything I've read about habit forming says that you must commit to 30 days, because 30 days, 3 or 4 weeks, is all the time that you need to make a habit become automatic. If you can make it through the initial conditioning phase, it becomes much easier to sustain. My research suggests that what happens when you pass that point is that psychologically you create a chain that you don't want to break, a run of days, and that will add a little drive to your habit, and that can't do any harm. Benjamin Franklin once said that it is easier to prevent bad habits than to break them, and I can't help but agree with him. From my own experience, I've noticed that breaking bad habits is far, far more difficult than forming new ones. So why not consider making an exchange instead of just trying to stop a bad habit? It's like I was saying earlier, I can exchange my coffee and a cake habit for a water and a piece of fruit habit. I could exchange a sweetie addiction, that's candy for all you non-Scots that are tuning in, but I can exchange candy for fruit. When I want a piece of candy, I instead go to the fruit bowl, and that exchange is made a lot easier by not having any candy in the house, of course. Once you've established your habits, whatever they may be, things will start to run on autopilot, and with a small amount of initial discipline, you can create a new habit that requires very little effort to maintain. A few final suggestions that I must make would be that firstly, you should write it down. Writing your resolution is important. Writing makes your ideas more clear and focuses you on your end result, and the act of doing so, as I mentioned in the 12-week year episode, makes it 80% more likely that you will actually do it. Not kidding about that. Science says that's so, and you know science. It knows stuff. The second thing I would add is that consistency is critical if you want to make a habit stick. If you want to get into the habit of reading, like I did, then read a little every day. Picking up a book a couple of times a week really won't cut it. Try also reading at the same time and in the same place for your 30 days. I read in bed at night. You might prefer in the morning or at lunch, whatever works for you. Thirdly, I'd say that a couple of weeks into your habit-forming commitment, you might find that you are getting lost or distracted. Post reminders about why you're doing it round about you. And next week, I'll talk about some apps that might help you to do that. And my final tip would be to remove temptation. Don't make it easy for yourself to fail. Throw out the cigarettes if that's what you're trying to quit. Flush them down the loo. Don't stash a packet somewhere close at hand. It'll only make you fail. Take the candy and give it away or throw it in the bin. Give yourself the best chance possible to succeed so you won't need to struggle with your willpower later. Aristotle said that excellence is an art won by training and habituation. One of the reasons that I started this podcast was to get back into the habit of creating. Here I sit now with a 15-episode season starting in 3 days, and the habit of creating is strong. It took drive, it took focus, and it took vision. But once I got into the swing of it, I just kept on going, and I've succeeded. You wouldn't be listening to this now if it wasn't for the power of habit. Frank Hall Crane says, to back that up, that habits are safer than rules. You don't have to watch them, and you don't have to keep them either. They keep you. As I reach the end of the summing up phase of today's podcast, I urge you now to create habits that will bring you closer to your goals. And don't try to change just because you want to make other people happy or because you feel pressure to change from some other quarter. If you want this, if you know why you are forming a new habit, and if you believe in the positive change that your efforts can bring about, you will succeed. And I'll end the lesson part of the podcast today with some words from Gandhi. He said that your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values become your destiny. Thanks once again for listening, and at the end of each episode I like to remind you that you are the master of your own destiny, and by that I mean that you can take control. If you want to kill a bad habit and replace it with a new one, then do it. That is this week's call to action. So when this episode finishes, just after you write an awesome review for me on iTunes or whatever, write down the habit you want to form, block out the next 30 days in your calendar, and decide on a stupid small step that you can take on each of those 30 days to form the habit. Got it? In next week's episode, I'm going to introduce 5 powerful free apps for Apple, Android, and desktop that you should grab to boost your productivity. But until then, good luck in the week ahead. Take control of your own destiny. Keep on shooting, and join me next time on Film Pro Productivity. The music that you are listening to right now is Adventures by A Himitsu. You can view the show notes for this episode on the official website at filmproproductivity.com. If you are struggling with something you think I can help with, or would like to tell me how you're getting on with all this stuff, then please get in touch via the contact page on the website. Alternately, you can get me on Twitter at FilmProProdPod or on Facebook at FilmProProductivity. Please support the podcast by subscribing, leaving a great review, and spreading the word. If you can get just one new person to tune in, that would be awesome. Psst. Are you still there? Here is an example of some of the garbage I have to cut out in order to make this sound like I know what I'm talking about. I've gotten into the habit of that's me talking about Tolkien. Jeez, I can't speak. What's happened? Habits or hobbits? It's up to you. That's the end of the episode. Thanks for listening. No, apologies for that. I've gotten into the habit. So there you go. Thanks for tuning in, folks. See you next week.